And I can't emphasize enough, Dr. Naila, why I brought this subject matter up, because I was thinking and I'm looking at all the politics going on, and I'm looking at our people arguing Donald Trump and Joe Biden, not knowing that while their activities affect us, it affects us because we're under occupation. But from the fact perspective, their activities within their internal politics is the activities of a foreign private corporate operation that has not a damn thing to do with us.
But yet
it affects us because we're in false jurisdictions. We're not, it's like this. Then we go into voluntary jurisdiction, consent.
Yes.
Now, why are people consent? How many of our people are filling out censuses right now and don't know that they've created a jurisdiction and revived a false foreign jurisdiction that actually been robbing them and abusing them, of which they are lawfully not a part, but they've agreed to be legally a part. Now they've perpetrated injury on themselves and don't even know what they've just done.
And they will come to you. No, what I'm saying, they will come to you and tell you, or in my case, my son was visiting, answered the door. Mom, this lady's here about I said, I don't want to talk to her. She's like, well, I have this paper I want to leave. It has her information. And I never went to the door. And he doesn't live there. And he handed me a piece of paper with numbers on it. I said, that's not me.
Of course it's not. It's a stock number. Now, guess what happened when you sign it? You agree to be their stock. No, I'm just saying, I'm just talking to people in general who don't understand jurisdiction. That's a political jurisdiction offering. And it's a political jurisdiction that you don't belong to.
Right.
But when you sign and agree, you just gave them leave against your estate, not as a living man or woman, but as a stock option, so they can refund their bankrupt corporation. Which means people who claim to be conscious, who even entertain it.
Someone's saying, oh, well, I put on there, I scratched out and I put more.
Sure, you can do that, but at the same time, it has nothing to do with you. Now you just made it have something to do with you. So now what happens is you just gave it jurisdiction. Do you understand what's in other words, the fact that people can't think deep enough, and it's not really deep, that it doesn't deal with them, it doesn't apply to them. You have to know jurisdictionally when something is presented to you that doesn't apply to you, you don't conditionally sign it. You don't deal with it. All right, look, let's give it an example. As an example, recently, some of you have heard Donald J. Trump make statements about this corporate entity in China called Huawei, right? And about technology transfers that are less than in their position honorable, right? Now, let's look at this. Does the owners of Huawei, right, the owners of that corporation, make a form to do a census on their stock and then take it to Russia and tell Russian people to sign it? And would a person from Russia talk about signing themselves over to back up Huawei stock? That's no different than when the United States sends a census among these people of the land, etc., and asks them to sign it. Exact same thing, which means the people don't understand that that's a private operation of private foreign corporate activity for human trafficking stock, because they're bankrupt and they need new stock derivatives to sell to the world, who already resisting buying them anyway. But here we go to bonds, but they keep talking about bondage and don't know what bonds are. Do you see the problem? We're back to jurisdiction. We're still dealing with jurisdiction. And what I'm saying, Dr. Naila, is this. is that as we converse these things, if people comprehend jurisdiction, they would recognize it themselves without us having to discuss it. Do you understand? Meaning that you recognize Happy the Clown even though he's changed the colors of his uniform.
Well, I think and somebody mentioned, I saw it, I missed it, but someone said that they promote like the census and so forth on these urban radio stations, and of course they're going to use venues that they know we listen to.
Let's look at this. Let's back at this up. Let's break this down, Dr. Naila. The urban radio stations owned by who? Foreign corporate operatives of the Roman Curia of the United States Corporation Company, franchised, licensed. But the implication is that they have some kind of sovereign independence. That was the implication, isn't it? They still don't understand jurisdiction. You see the problem?
Oh, yeah.
So we're trying to get people not to go pro or con, but to examine what they themselves are saying. Examine when people are coming to you, who they are, where they derive their authority, what's their nationality, if they have an entity operation that they're presenting to you, knowing factually that the entity corporate LLC operation takes on the nationality of its creator. Therefore, nationality comes into play again. Now you're talking about jurisdiction again.
It becomes very evident. It should be evident when you see the narrative, the mainstream narrative is very, they're talking about solidarity here amongst the Moors. Well, you see the solidarity with the media, the so-called entertainment industry, the so-called medical industry, the ones that are still.
Now let's look at why is solidarity. Now let's trace
and why we can't be.
No. Let's
start with them. Okay.
Let's start to identify the solidarity that you talk about. The implication on the surface seems to be what you would call agreed organized activity. What you need to recognize is that these are corporate entity platforms that belong to a group body of foreign, alien, hybrid European people. They are a controlled venue. That's their unity, not morality, not bloodline, not pedigree, but human trafficking operations that are all controlled by a conglomerate board of directors. But people keep thinking these entities are sovereign activities of people who may participate in them, when the people are stock by agreeing to even entertain these things. Did I make a point on that, or do I need to go further?
No. I mean, I always characterize it as the octopus. The head of the octopus is the so-called.
That would be, you can look at it. No, the head of the octopus would be, in fact, by corporate construct, the Pope of Rome and the Bishopric of Rome. Right. The arms, the first parts of the arms of the octopus in that allegory would be the Queen of England, and what they refer to as the royal families, or the elite
13
families.
bloodlines.
Yes. And then the stinging tentacles would be known as the congressional industrial military complex, known as the arm of enforcement for the United States Corporation Company, known as the U.S. platform for invasion of the sovereign rights of nation states, going to and fro the earth, devouring nations, and occupying from a land of people already politically devoured, now known as persons of color, Negro, Black, and colored, and Indians, who are really the same people who don't know their pedigree and their bloodline. And when we go back to the earlier statement, why can't we as a people? Well, guess what? The people, if they're going to be what? Bonded in unity, must honor their mothers and fathers. Who are they? They are Moors. Who do they agree to be? Colored people, which takes them off the platform of international law, treaty protections, and securities. Is that complex? It's not. But the concept of jurisdiction is not clear with them. Are we clear? You know, even a lot of times when people talk about name and nationality, what they don't explain to the people it are and is jurisdictions. And so therefore people look at it as an opinion, but whenever they're challenged, as example, somebody steps on their steps and has a census for the United States Corporation Company, they start signing things, don't even know they're dealing with foreign persons claiming to be Americans, and their agreement is a sanction for their estates to back bonds that back the bankrupt United States Corporation Company, which is owned by foreign alien Europeans, foreign agents who actually have made the people stock, and that has been backing them up economically around the world, and they call it floating bonds. And these people don't know, as soon as they start sanctioning the census, they've agreed to relinquish their estate again, not that it hasn't already been hypothecated. Assumed, that's called assumed jurisdiction. And so when they agree to be people of color, assumed jurisdiction is automatic. They claim to be black people, assumed jurisdiction is automatic. When they claim a nationality, immediately you have, by international law rights, an injection of averment of jurisdiction and adverse claim automatically by law, and thus under quo warranto, jurisdiction must be proven for the fact before any activity takes place. So how are they going to have a census for human stock under the guise of a census, and these people keep signing these things and not even understanding jurisdiction? They're self-violating. Now it's called voluntary jurisdiction, thus therefore consent. So what they're doing is they're perpetuating against themselves the very problems politically and economically they're trying to solve.
No, that's wonderful. Very good. Let me see. This is a shout out from Brother Michael West Lawrence, Tunica El Bay. He said, out of all my travels over many years, to free myself was not made clear until I reached the House of Real Awakening Minds and spent that quality time with Taj.
Oh, appreciate it. And I hope we did some good.
Yeah.
Because then you can understand, even like when, you know, those Moors who understand jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about honesty confederation, right? Wakata, the Duke de Munye. When we talk about the fake sale of Little Spain that they call Louisiana Territory, when we look at the Nanacoke in this area and the Renapi in the area of Shakamoxon and our different confederations, knowing that we're all the same people and territorial federations, etc., we're understanding what? Even political jurisdictions among ourselves. But then we deal with what you call a national jurisdiction, and that's nationality. And that's where the unity comes in. And then in harmony with the ancient traditions and customs of our ancient mothers and fathers, we also know that the land can't be sold. So any claims of these foreign alien Europeans buying our land for a string of beads is B. Eskidorf, because they can't sell it in the first place. So now we're understanding jurisdiction again, and our people need to understand these things.
Here's another comment, a question. Islam Grand Sheik, Brother Taj Tarik Bey, the same way we have evidence of Prophet Noble Drew Ali adopting as a corporate name Moorish Science Temple of America through a religious affidavit of organization, do you/we have evidence of the Moorish divine and national movement of the world being founded by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali? Can you direct us to
now? This is why when you study the history of Noble Drew Ali's activity, then you start finding about Drew Ali and others. There's others who also worked with him to reestablish, because you got to remember.
Is that another?
Yes.
DR.
Yeah. DRU.
Oh,
Druze. Yeah.
Druze, okay.
Yeah. Now the deal of it is because people usually do not what you call in any beyond surface study, they're not aware that these are political jurisdictions that were created. Do you understand? But the political jurisdictions are addressing jurisdictions that already exist. In other words, a jurisdictional operation created to dispense information to make people aware of a political jurisdiction that already exists before they were daggone born. That's the Moorish Divine National Movement. So you understand that jurisdiction. So then you understand the theft of the estates of the Moors and the infiltration of the Divine National Movement via J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, which they tell you them their own writings are exposed to you. And then Drew Ali had to adopt a religious affidavit in order to maintain a trust to protect the property because the people were in the process of learning. They didn't even understand what this is all about. They knew he was right in the spirit of things, but intellectually, they didn't have a civic background. People were coming from all walks of life, from the church, mosque, synagogues, atheists, different nation states, and finding out the truth of the bloodline, the truth of the real history here, who's who, learning that these foreign Europeans were actually descendants of invaders. They're not Americans. They were claiming your birthright to claim your estate. So he created not only a political jurisdiction, he was forced politically to make jurisdictional changes in order to preserve the integrity of the movement, which is why the religious affidavit was adopted, not 1913, 1928. Duh. You see, here we go, jurisdiction, aren't we? Now, when I present that from that perspective, people can remove the emotions and just simply look at the law processes and the legal processes, then look at the history and look at the motivations by political necessity of different things that were done and recognize that some of those things were actually political compromises by necessity, but because the people were not competent. Where was their protection as they were learning? Now you're getting back into trust law, don't you? Now you understand why Drew Ali set up a trust and nobody, you'll see people mention it and not go into discipline, science of civics and teach specifically about the trust. You'll see a lot of Moors talk about the trust, right? Ask them about the detail of the trust. And you'll see a whole bunch of conversations, a bunch of opinions, and who got it and where it is and what, and they're not even clear. Why? Because they have not been taught civics and made what? Jurisdictional distinctions, because it should be common knowledge, just like you're looking, meaning that like this, as an example, you can study people from many different organizations, many which broke off from the Moorish movement because of infiltration, including the Nation or the Temple of Islam, which later became the Nation of Islam, which still is a branch of the Moorish movement. And when you dig into the history, you'll find that these are still what? Political jurisdictions, aren't they? Aren't they? Mm-hmm. They're related and they have a history together, but they also separate, aren't they? Aren't they?
Yes.
But if people don't know the politics of how these things evolve, they look at them as the people as being separate people, as opposed to looking at the jurisdictions that they were created, but due to the politics being political jurisdictions, but not the people actually being separate from nationality. You see the point? Mm-hmm. And when people don't know that, then they start identifying themselves by the entities and not by their pedigree bloodlines. So now we're talking jurisdiction. See why it must be refined, Dr. Naila? Mm-hmm. Because it's easy for people who don't understand jurisdiction to get confused and thus divided. You see the whole point? Because they don't know the difference between person, corporate entity, and people, the physical being. Because they've been trained that they're the same thing. They'll say every person must do this. They don't know that the lawful process or the legal process is saying the corporation must do this, that, or the other. And then they agree to things that they shouldn't even be talking about. Well, every person should sign the corporate census. Never dawns on them to show it to me in the treaty and the Constitution, did it?
No.
Do you see the point? Jurisdiction. And logically, in relationship to what I just said, persons who are in leadership position who know these things should basically give the people the basics so that people can make what? Competent, rational decisions in all that they do, socially, politically, and economically, and thus, by virtue of those activities, demonstrate their social, political, economic, and spiritual alliances, which is also a jurisdiction, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, let me see if there's another question. I want to see what else is up there. There are some questions I'm just not going to get into. Someone mentioned that they are, telling the people with regard to the census that it funds the programs that help the community. Of course, that's deployed.
Of course. Now let's look at this. Let's address that, because that's an issue, right? Because it's a jurisdictional issue. Now, for the record, for someone who present that as an argument particularly to our people, right? Show the record where such funds have been coming to your community outside of them gentrifying your community. Show the record where they've been benefiting in the past. Show the record where the commercial mercenaries had cease and desist murdering them on the street. Show the record where the commercial mercenaries were not invading people's houses and shooting old women and children in their homes under the guise of law and authority, which they didn't have. And then talk about the history of these censuses that they've been signing, and show where it's been benefiting our so-called neighborhoods, and show where it has ungentrified, degentrified neighborhoods that our people have a history of suffering from. Now we're back to jurisdiction, aren't we? Because it's still jurisdiction, isn't it? You notice how they notice how they talk about, oh, you're going to get some funds.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to do, they're going to steal some funds from you.
See, Robert G. asked if you would go in on the correlation of the fall of the Red House to the modern day jurisdictions in the U.S. court.
Basis of the politics. And what it is the false colorable jurisdiction known as, commonly around the world today, the U.S. democracy. That's also a jurisdiction that evolved in the political platforms of the world after the fall of the Red House, 1492, including their celebration of the fall, called January the 1st. And it ain't a calendar year. It is a political jurisdiction created in relationship to the fall. And as a matter of fact, they used to do it in what they call blackface. And this past year, they did it again as a symbol. And that is what? A political jurisdiction. But it ain't what most people think it is. And they assemble at 6th and Moore Street at Philadelphia.
Everything they do is done through
They
symbols.
tell you the truth. Do the people understand jurisdiction? Do you see the point?
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, they say that mum's the word.
Mm-hmm.
It's called mummer's parade.
Okay, here's a question. Islam Grand Sheik, what is the so-called civil defense force as opposed to the U.S. Armed Forces? Forgive me, please, but how do they both compare to the National Guard?
Well, the National Guard is essentially implying more of the legitimate platform coming from the militias that are basically constitutions. Most of these other venues are platforms created by the board of directors of the platform of the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath under the Defense Department or Department of Defense, which is actually under the thumb of the operatives of the Circle Church and the Chancery, and their operations have been more or less feudal under a color of law and not under Constitution, Republic, or of treaties. Now, that's the fact. However, you'll notice that the so-called National Guard still comprises mostly of individuals of the foreign corporate entity and not of the nationals of the land. So therefore, they're in their nature of operations de facto too.
Question. Well, I'll leave that. Let me just see if somebody else has something else to say. Before I go there. Here's one comment. Nadine Figueroa Bay says folks are afraid to enforce the treaties under threat and duress, which is a violation.
Let's stop right there.
Which is a violation of their Constitution and U.S. codes.
All right. So now the fact that that statement is even made and it's valid is proof that the persons that have been claiming to be government are what? Waging war on the people. Since when are the people afraid of a government that is theirs? Why are they afraid? Because they know that these people are de facto. Now you're talking jurisdiction again. So why don't they talk about the jurisdictional issue? They're admitting a fear. Why? Because they know that they're under attack. Now what we need to do is get the people start admitting it and now start addressing constitutions and treaties. And then we're doing what? What is according to constitutions and treaties? When the people fear the government, you already know that the government is de facto. The rule in treaty and constitution for such persons is called malfeasance, and it's called misprision of treason. And the penalty for treason is death, not to you, the people, but to them. Where's the ropes? Oh, and the guillotines.
Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. There's some that's being said that what we're headed towards, or what the deep state really wants to do, is to decimate the U.S. corporation on operating at North America to bring in control of the United Nations.
Let's back up. Now, I kind of sense where the statement is going, but they need to understand the deep state is the U.S.
Right, the U.S., but they want.
They're not. Hold on. The statement that I'm hearing is that the deep state wants to decimate the U.S. corporation. The deep state is the
their
US
operations and here to bring in a different. You know you've talked about. Yeah.
Let's back up again.
All right,
because I think it's being missed.
It's me asking you this question.
The U.S. corporation and the deep state are one and the same.
True. But they bankrupted themselves before, have they not? I'm just asking.
Okay. We got to be clear. Parties.
Okay.
Jurisdictions.
All right.
The deep state, which is another name for the contracting corporations that are members of the Roman Curia,
okay,
that is comprised styled as the U.S. democracy, is responsible for the party members are responsible for overthrowing the republic. Legitimate platform. The U.S. democracy is not a legitimate political platform. It is the deep state.
Why are they moving towards giving UN
because the
control?
UN is also
the deep
state.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Under different, now we're talking jurisdictions, because the people on the surface think these are different political jurisdictions because of the names.
True, that's what I'm
And this is why it's important. It's an excuse because that's what they want to bring in the United Nations, because that is the open warfare to finally use under war powers to take the people's defense from them, i.e. to do what they've been tending to do all the time, is to do what? Abridge the Second Amendment to the Constitution for the United States, disarm the people and enslave them, having no regress, doing to them what they've already done to the people of the land. You see the point?
Mm-hmm.
They're exercising what you call stage completions of the existence of the agenda of the unum sanctum operations, which is what is the politics.
That's their end game.
That is the end game.